You too. How are you? Yes, yes. It's a very beautiful day here today. Yeah, it's very sunny. And I decided to seize the day and embrace it for everything that it has to offer. So, yeah, I'm good. Things all right where you are? That is great. That is great. Yes, I think I did we talk last week? I'm not even sure. I think we talked the week before that. Yes, yes, because last week I had some things going on, and so it was not very feasible, and so here we are. Yes, I heard that. Oh my goodness, that was epic. I saw the videos. Yes, I did see the videos, and of course I was heartbroken for him and for people like him who have struggled in Hollywood and in general in America and everywhere else in the world to sort of make a name for themselves, establish themselves, obtain a little bit of success, only to have it sort of come down to this one tragic, horrific moment, where he will be forever judged by that. So I was very heartbroken for him. And oh, that's a good question. Do I think this has anything to do with slavery? Oh my goodness, that's a very deep question. I never really thought about that because, I had many different theories about what triggered this young man to behave in this way. And I was actually speaking with a friend and or colleague, well, not a colleague, not a friend, but just someone. And he basically had this whole theory about the subtext of the joke and sort of the second meaning underneath the level meaning. And we analyzed that together. And then I thought, oh, okay, that makes more sense of why he did this. But then I spoke with another friend of mine from Brooklyn yesterday, and she had a whole other theory about certain things that Mr. Smith had said in his book about when he was growing up and watching his father hurt his mother and physically hurt his mother, and him not being able to do anything about it because he was so little. So he felt so helpless and powerless, and so she felt like that possibly was one of the triggers that sort of in that moment caused him to behave in this way. So we sort of concluded that there were many, many different triggers that just sort of like brings a person to that split second moment in their life where they just make an absolutely horrific choice. I didn't really think of this aspect though of slavery. And that's an interesting question. Maybe I should try to explore that and we could just like scrap the other topic we were going to talk about today and let me see if I can think about that off the cuff. Well, I think possibly there were some very deep triggers. I mean, I think there were triggers that were sort of superficial, then mid-level, and really deep triggers that, if you were to analyze this young man, you'd realize or understand, I guess, a bit better what what happened. I think, for example, with hair, I mean, you look at my hair, and for years I wore weaves and extensions and wigs in my hair for decades. I could not be seen. It was unthinkable for me to be seen with my natural hair in my life for many, many years. And one day I decided, I began to question that. Like, what is this about? Like, why do you find your own hair so objectionable or so lacking that you have to cover it all the time with weaves and wigs and extensions and so on? And I said, take it out, and be without it for a few days. And so I did that, and I showed up to work here in Paris, and Immediately the response was very negative. It was kind of like, oh my God, what did you do? Put your extensions back. I mean, more than one person said that to me. Actually, this is not the first time I went natural. I did go natural before in New York also. Um, and perhaps to a similar response, but perhaps not as intense as I got here. And but the difference now is because I'm just so much older and I have been through so much in my life. I've had so many experiences. And for me, I responded very differently to that. I just stood my ground and I said, look, I mean, this is my hair. This is my hair. And I love my hair. I'm going to wear my hair the way that it is. Okay. And I don't need to, have wigs and extensions to feel beautiful. Now, that's not to say I would never wear wigs and extensions ever again in my life. I mean, I give myself permission to leave my options open at any time that I choose. But the idea of me feeling for such a long time that I needed to cover my hair, I came to the realization that it was coming from societal pressure and what people have been telling me is beautiful or not beautiful my entire life. And me buying into that, whether subconsciously or unconsciously. Now, what does that have to do with Will slapping the bejesus out of Chris Rock? This is so not funny. But, Chris Rock, he did a documentary years ago called Good Hair, I think, or Bad Hair. I think it was Good Hair. And I never saw the documentary, but apparently it was sort of like a very kind of tongue in cheek, mocking documentary about women like me and their natural hair. And so it was sort of reinforced, I don't know, but it seems like it reinforced certain stereotypes about women like me and our hair. And we are the only ones on the planet with hair like this. Everybody else has a different kind of hair. So we have been sort of held to a certain degraded status because of our hair. I mean, sometimes to get to a job, you would be fired, you'd be asked to unbraid your hair or whatever. It's always been a thing where now I think in California and 14 other states, they've enacted legislation to protect women's right to have their hair as they want their hair. So here is a very, very big and sensitive issue in this community that I happen to be a member of, called quote unquote black women, whatever that even means, because that's a social construct, which I've said before on other videos I don't buy into anymore either, because no one is black and white. I'm not black, and the people calling themselves white are not white. We're not opposites of each other. This was a construct that's been put into our minds, and we've all basically drunk the Kool-Aid. But so with Jada, I think if the joke is just taken on the surface and not the second meanings that, I think were also there, I think she was triggered because, on one level, I mean, there's a multiplicity of levels here. On one level, because you take this all the way back to slavery and how we were thought of as savages, and our hair was ugly, our face was ugly, our features were ugly. And you're sitting there in an auditorium where you are the overwhelming minority, people like you, and you had to fight to be there. Just in 2016, Jada and her husband had to protest the lack of people who look like them being nominated for Academy Awards, right? And being a part of, being, really welcomed into the community of Hollywood in a real way and not on a superficial way. They were the very ones who did that. And so now they're sitting there, right, on the most important night of Will Smith's life, as his professional life anyway. And you have this other person who happens to also be from the same community, and a part of the minority of them in that auditorium, making fun of this woman's hair. I mean, on that level, you can take that back to slavery, because I think that during those days, it was quite normal for the quote unquote master and the master's family and the master's friends to sit around and have the slaves entertain them. And how are you going to get the master to laugh? I mean, one of the ways you get the master to laugh is you say horrific things about your other, friends and family who happen to be called slaves themselves. And the more that you make the master laugh, the more privileged you become, the more you are in the master's good graces because you are a funny one and you say horrific things about those around you. You're not going to say horrific things about the master and about the master's family. Obviously, that's obviously forbidden. It's obviously verboten, and you would be crazy to try it, but it's more acceptable to make fun of those who are in the same situation as you. And so I think this dynamic was very present in that auditorium on the night of the Oscars, whenever that was, a week ago, where you have this also happens to be a successful comedian who happens to be coded as black, you know, opening up this other person who is coded as black to ridicule in an auditorium filled with people who, in a million years, could never understand the sensitivity that she feels because of who she is and what she has come out of and what it took her to get to where she is, her and her husband, etc., 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 etc. So I think that what does slavery have to do with that moment? I mean, I think many different things. I mean, it's the uglifying of our hair to begin with, and then it is the pitting of, you know, one against the other in that way, and for them not to even realize it. That's the thing, they don't realize that. And then the slapping itself goes back to that too, because they were taught. If you look at tribes in Africa, very rarely do you see people who are not cooperating with each other. I mean, this warring behavior between quote unquote black men, I mean, is learned behavior in my view, right? They learn this from someplace, and for me, this traces its roots back to the time when people were enslaved, when they were trafficked, when they were forced to work without pay for their entire working lives by their de facto employers with the statutory and apparent authority of the government, when they were encouraged to be pitted against each other, to rat on each other, to out each other, to gain favors from their masters, quote unquote masters, whatever that even means. So I think when you look at on black on black crimes in society, you also see a very troubling trend. I mean, you don't have European Americans shooting up European Americans in the streets, or Indian Americans, or Korean Americans, or Chinese Americans, or even Hispanic Americans for that matter, shooting and killing each other. The way that you have African Americans being violent, especially African American men, but also women, I mean, I have my own experiences where, no one has, physically, well, actually, no, that's not true. I was physically assaulted once, but the the women attack each other verbally. You're on the metro, you have done nothing to someone. She's on the metro, you're on the subway. You're on the subway, she's on the subway, you're trying to get to work, and it's like she's more likely to attack someone who looks like her than she is to attack someone who does not. This is learned behavior. So when Will Smith walked up to that stage and slapped the bejesus out of Chris Rock, that dynamic was there too, because he would not have done that if that were Jimmy Kimmel saying the same thing. I don't think so. Or some other person coded as anything other than quote unquote black, right? He would have had a certain distance that he would have known he could not cross. He crossed that distance because he knew Chris Rock, and Chris Rock and he are both black men, quote unquote. And this is how they have been taught by society, going all the way back to slavery, to interact with each other. So that's what three different levels I've already identified there. It's the hair, right?